I never imagined that my life could be rewritten in a single evening. I was 19, old enough to dream of my own future, yet still treated as a child who had no right to speak. That night, the walls of our grand dining room felt colder than ever, the chandelier casting sharp shadows across the polished mahogany table. My parents sat across from me, their faces stern, unreadable. I thought I had done something wrong. "Angela," my father began, his tone heavy with finality, "you will be married by the end of next month." I froze. The words didn't make sense at first. Married? To whom? I hadn't even been allowed to date, let alone choose a husband. My fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the porcelain plate. "I don't understand," I whispered, searching their eyes for some hint of a joke, a misunderstanding. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is not for you to understand. It is what must be done." Her words felt like iron chains wrapping around my chest. What must be done? My life, my choices, all reduced to an obligation I couldn't even name. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, but the weight of their silence suffocated me. I pushed back my chair. "No. You can't just decide this. Who is he? Why me?" My father's eyes flickered with something, fear maybe or guilt, but it vanished before I could be sure. "His name is Daniel. His family, they have been close to ours for years. This union will protect what matters most." Protect what? Protect whom? The words rang in my head, taunting me with their emptiness. I stumbled upstairs to my room, my heart racing. I wanted to slam the door, to cry until dawn, but even in my anger I knew I had no real power. My parents had always controlled every step of my life. But marriage? That was a prison sentence disguised as duty. Sleep never came. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, questions burning in my mind. Who was Daniel? Why was this marriage so urgent? And what exactly were we protecting? The next morning, I searched for answers in the hushed whispers of our house staff. They avoided my eyes, muttering about secrets best left buried. That phrase clung to me like smoke. Secrets. My family was hiding something worth sacrificing my freedom for. When I finally saw a photograph of Daniel, slipped under my bedroom door in an unmarked envelope, my breath caught. He was handsome, dark-haired, with a distant expression in his eyes. But what unsettled me most wasn't his face. It was the note scribbled on the back of the photo. "You don't know the truth yet. But you will." My hands trembled as I read the words over and over. Someone, somewhere wanted me to understand why my life was being sold away. And I was determined to find out that I had always imagined the first time I would meet the man I was to marry. I pictured nervous laughter, maybe even a spark of warmth, something that hinted at love. Instead, when Daniel walked into our living room that Sunday afternoon, the only thing I felt was a chill. He stood tall, dressed in a tailored suit that seemed more like armor than clothing. His dark hair was neatly combed, his jaw sharp, his eyes unreadable. For a moment, those eyes flickered over me, calculating, as though he were weighing my worth rather than meeting me. "So," he said softly, his voice controlled, "you must be Angela." I swallowed hard. "And you must be Daniel." The silence that followed was suffocating. My parents, of course, sat nearby, their smiles stiff, their eyes expectant. To them, this was a business transaction finally coming to fruition. But to me, it felt like a betrayal written into my own blood. Daniel's hand extended toward me. It was a polite gesture, nothing more. I hesitated before placing mine in his. His grip was firm, cold, as though he wanted to remind me that this was not a choice. It was an agreement already signed. "You'll get used to it," he murmured so quietly only I could hear. His words sent a shiver down my spine. Get used to what? We sat down across from one another, the distance between us heavy with unspoken truths. My father launched into pleasantries, speaking of family honor, of legacy, of loyalty. Daniel responded with clipped nods, his attention never fully leaving me. It was as though he wanted to say something but couldn't. Or wouldn't. After what felt like hours, the formalities ended and my parents excused themselves, leaving us alone. I braced myself for conversation, maybe even small talk. Instead, Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "You don't know why this is happening, do you?" The question hit me like a blade. My lips parted, but no sound came out. Finally, I managed, "No. Do you?" His expression darkened. "Yes. And you won't like it." I leaned closer, desperate for answers. "Then tell me." I deserved to know. But he shook his head, his gaze shifting to the window as though the truth lurked just outside. It's not my place. Not yet. Frustration burned in my chest. This stranger, this man who was supposed to be my husband, knew the secret my family had buried and still he refused to share it. It felt like everyone in the world knew the script except me, the unwilling actress trapped in a play I never auditioned for. That night I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way his words carried weight, the way his silence screamed louder than anything he said. Who was Daniel really? A pawn like me or someone playing a much larger game? 2 days later, my question began to find its answer. I returned from a walk in the garden to find an envelope slipped under my door. My heart raced just like the last time. Inside was a single piece of paper written in the same hurried handwriting as before. He knows the truth. But so do they. Don't trust anyone. My hands trembled. Who was sending these notes? Friend? A traitor? And what truth could possibly demand I be tied to a man I barely knew? The shadows in my room seemed to lengthen, pressing in on me. For the first time I felt the weight of the lie crushing me, suffocating me. And the worst part wasn't that my parents had betrayed me. It was the sinking suspicion that Daniel, the stranger who was to become my husband, might be the only one who could set me free. The days that followed blurred together, each one heavier than the last. My parents behaved as though nothing unusual was happening, as though arranging my marriage like a financial transaction was completely natural. I, however, lived in a constant state of unease, haunted by the notes, by Daniel's guarded eyes, by the silence that seemed to grow louder with every passing hour. One evening, as I descended the grand staircase, I overheard my parents' hushed voices seeping through the study door. I knew I shouldn't listen, but curiosity gripped me like a vice. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. If she finds out, it will ruin everything, my mother whispered sharply. She won't, my father replied. Daniel understands what's at stake. He'll keep her in line. My knees nearly gave out. Keep me in line? What was I? A pawn, a liability. The words stung more than any slap could have. And yet what unsettled me most was the way they spoke of Daniel, as if he were more than just my future husband. As if he were complicit. That night I confronted him. We were sitting in the garden, moonlight casting long shadows across the stone path. Tell me the truth, I demanded, my voice trembling. Why are we being forced into this? What are my parents hiding? Daniel's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing, only stared into the darkness as though searching for answers he couldn't give. Finally he turned to me. Angela, if I told you, your world would collapse. Then let it collapse. I burst out. My voice cracked, raw with desperation. I can't keep living like this, blind, trapped. I need to know. For the first time his eyes softened and I saw the man behind the cold mask. He reached for my hand, hesitating before his fingers brushed mine. You're stronger than you think, he murmured. But the truth isn't mine to reveal. It belongs to your family. Anger flared inside me. Then they'll never tell me. He didn't answer. And in his silence, I heard the truth he refused to speak. I was being protected from something far worse than I could imagine. The next morning I sought answers on my own. I searched my father's office, rifling through drawers, scanning old letters and documents. Most of it was mundane. Contracts, financial records. But then, hidden beneath a stack of papers, I found an old photograph. It was faded, edges frayed with time. A group of people stood together, smiling stiffly. My parents were there, younger, their arms around another couple I didn't recognize. And between them, a child with dark eyes and a serious expression. On the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, were 4 words that made my blood run cold. The debt must be paid. I stared at the picture, my heart pounding. Was this about money? A crime? A promise broken long ago? Before I could process it, footsteps echoed in the hall. I shoved the photograph into my dress pocket just as the door opened. It was Daniel. His eyes swept over me, then the open drawers. He didn't look angry, just resigned. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I found something, I whispered, pulling out the photograph. He froze when he saw it. His expression hardened, but there was no surprise in his eyes. He already knew. Angela, he said carefully, if you keep digging, you'll uncover things that can't be undone. Are you ready for that? My hands shook as I clutched the photograph to my chest. I didn't answer. because deep down I knew I couldn't stop. The cracks in my family's perfect facade were widening, and the truth was clawing its way out. And whatever it was, I was determined to face it, no matter the cost. The photograph burned in my pocket like a secret I wasn't meant to hold. Every time I touched it, I felt the weight of something older than me, something that had been hidden for decades. Daniel's warning echoed in my head. Are you ready for that? But I knew there was no turning back. 2 nights later, I found my chance. My parents were hosting a dinner with Daniel's family. The dining room was a theater of false smiles and forced laughter, yet beneath it all, I sensed tension so thick it could choke me. Halfway through the meal, Daniel's father raised his glass. To the future, he said, his eyes locking on me. And to the peace our families have fought so hard to preserve. Peace. The words stuck in my throat like poison. This wasn't peace. It was blackmail. After dinner, while the adults retreated to the study, I slipped away, pressing my ear to the heavy oak door. What I heard made my blood run cold. We promised them this would stay buried, my father said, his voice low but urgent. The marriage ensures it. Without it, the past will come back to destroy us all. Your daughter deserves to know, Daniel's mother replied sharply. She's being dragged into a lie she never chose. She doesn't need to know, my mother snapped. She was a child when it happened. She won't remember. And if she doesn't ask questions, she'll never have to. My pulse thundered in my ears. A child. Remember what? I stumbled back, my body trembling. They were talking about me. Whatever had been buried wasn't just about them. It was about me, my life, my very identity. That night, I confronted Daniel again. He didn't seem surprised when I burst into his room, slamming the door behind me. Tell me, I demanded, tears stinging my eyes. Tell me what they did. Tell me why I'm the one paying for it. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked older, wearier than his 22 years. Finally, he met my gaze, his voice heavy with reluctant honesty. Angela, your parents aren't protecting you. They're protecting themselves. 20 years ago, your father made a choice. One that ruined my family. I blinked, my breath catching. What choice? He hesitated before continuing. There was a fire. A factory your father owned. Corners were cut, safety ignored. My uncle died in that fire. My parents nearly lost everything. Your father promised to make it right, to repay the debt. But he never did. Instead, they buried it. And now, this marriage is their way of sealing the wound. To bind our families so no one speaks of it again. My knees went weak. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. A fire. A death. My father's sins stitched into my future. So I'm the payment, I whispered. Daniel's eyes softened with pity. You're the sacrifice. The words sliced through me. Everything I had ever believed about my family, about their pride and honor, crumbled into ash. I was nothing more than a bargaining chip, a bandage to cover the scar of their betrayal. And yet, as I looked at Daniel, I saw something unexpected. He wasn't my enemy. He was trapped too, bound by a past neither of us had chosen. I won't let them control me, I said finally, my voice shaking but firm. If they think marrying you will silence me, they're wrong. I'll uncover every secret they've buried. And when I do, they'll regret ever underestimating me. Daniel studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then we're not enemies, Angela. Maybe we're allies. For the first time, I felt a flicker of strength inside me. The truth was out, and it was uglier than I'd imagined. But it was only the beginning. Because if my family had buried one lie, how many more were waiting to be unearthed? The night after Daniel revealed the truth, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while the storm outside rattled the windows. Every crack of thunder felt like my father's voice, every flash of lightning like my mother's sharp eyes. I had always believed my family's wealth and influence were the rewards of hard work, of pride, of legacy. But now I knew the truth. It was all built on ashes, on death, on betrayal, and I was meant to be the plaster over their sins. By dawn, I had made my decision. I wouldn't be silent anymore. When I entered the dining room that morning, my parents were already seated, sipping coffee as though the world was still intact. My father's eyes flicked to me, cold and commanding. Angela, said, we need to finalize details for the wedding. I didn't sit. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. I know about the fire. The porcelain cup slipped from my mother's hands, shattering against the floor. My father went pale, his lips tightening into a thin line. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. "Who told you?" he demanded. "It doesn't matter," I said, standing taller than I ever had before. "I know the truth. Daniel's uncle died because of your choices. And now you're using me as the price for your silence." My mother rose to her feet, her face etched with fury. "You don't understand what's at stake. If the truth comes out, everything we've built will be destroyed." "Maybe it should be destroyed," I snapped. My voice cracked, but I didn't back down. "Maybe the truth matters more than your reputation." The room fell silent, the only sound the storm outside. My father's eyes darkened, but beneath the anger I saw guilt eating at him. He had carried this lie for years, and now it stood before him embodied in me. That evening Daniel found me in the garden. His face was unreadable, but his voice was gentle. "You confronted them, didn't you?" "Yes," I admitted. "And I don't regret it." He studied me for a long moment. "So what now? Will you go through with the marriage?" The question cut deep. Part of me wanted to run, to leave this cursed family behind, to find freedom far away. But another part of me knew the truth wasn't something I could escape. It was rooted in my blood, in the ashes of the fire that had claimed his uncle's life. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I know I won't be silent. Not anymore." Daniel stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. For the first time his touch wasn't cold. It was steady, grounding. "Then whatever choice you make, you won't make it alone." His words stirred something inside me, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected. I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in white, my reflection staring back at me like a stranger. The veil felt like a cage, the gown like chains. As the doors to the hall opened, I heard the guests rise, their whispers filling the air. At the end of the aisle, Daniel waited, his expression unreadable but his eyes fixed on me. Behind me, I felt the weight of my parents' expectations pressing against my spine. And in that moment, I realized the final choice was mine. I could walk down that aisle, bind myself to a marriage born of lies, and bury the truth forever. Or I could turn away, shatter the illusion, and bring everything my family had built crashing down. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for me to move. And as I took the first step, I knew my decision would change everything, forever.